Have you ever felt like you were living in a cage without bars? A sense of confinement that doesn't come from laws, but from invisible pressures within. We desperately long to break them, yet the more we struggle, the tighter these invisible shackles seem to grip our wrists and our very spirits. Why is true freedom so elusive? Why do we find ourselves trapped in cycles that we never consciously chose, yet cannot seem to escape from? Time seems to stand still when we are caught in the grip of our internal struggles, frozen in a moment of pain that we cannot move past. The weight of these chains is not just physical, it is a mental burden that drags us down into the depths of our own despair and isolation. Deep down, there is a voice calling for liberation, a flicker of hope that refuses to be extinguished despite the overwhelming darkness that surrounds us today. Every movement is a battle against the resistance of our own history. Every step forward feels like dragging a mountain of iron across an endless desert. The harder we fight the symptoms of our confinement, the more we ignore the root cause, leaving us exhausted and defeated in the face of our pain. This is the journey of the soul seeking its own release. A path through the shadows to find the key that was never truly lost, just hidden. Silas, a traveler in the mind, has spent his life trying to sever these chains, believing that external freedom would finally grant him the peace he seeks. He believes that by escaping the control of his past, his parents, and his society, he will finally be able to breathe and live for himself. But every time a link is broken, another grows in its place, colder and stronger than before, rooted in the very fear he tries to outrun. The labels on these chains are familiar to us all. The expectations of others, the guilt of mistakes, and the fear of never being quite enough. They wrap around the heart, squeezing the joy out of life, turning every ambition into a burden, and every relationship into a source of hidden pressure. When he looks into the mirror of his soul, he sees only the constraints, unable to recognize the man beneath the heavy armor of his own defense. He is a prisoner of his own perception, trapped in a narrative where he is always the victim of a system he cannot seem to change. The exhaustion is profound, a tiredness that goes beyond the body and settles deep within the bones, whispering that escape is impossible for someone like him. Each step forward feels like a betrayal of the weight he has carried for so long, as if the chains have become a part of him. In this labyrinth of the mind, every turn leads back to the same realization. The chains are not outside, they are woven into his very identity. When Silas tries to fight back with anger, the world turns into a storm of chaos, reflecting the internal conflict that rages within his wounded heart. He strikes out with all his might, using the sword of his will, but the shackles are fluid and elusive, reforming the moment they are broken. Resistance is often just another form of dependence. By hating his chains, he remains bound to them, giving them the power to define his every action. The blood he sheds in anger only feeds the strength of the iron, reinforcing the cycle of pain and reaction that keeps him trapped in misery. He realizes that you cannot defeat a shadow by fighting it with a sword. You only exhaust yourself while the shadow remains perfectly intact and unmoved. In the silence of his defeat, a new understanding begins to dawn. The war he has been fighting is one that can never be won by force. He is beginning to see that the chains are not his enemies, but messengers of a truth he has been too afraid to look at directly. The moment of surrender is not a moment of weakness, but a moment of profound clarity where the ego finally lets go of its struggle. To be free, he must first understand the origin of his bondage. He must look back at the hands that forged these heavy iron links. Instead of rage, Silas chooses observation. He stops trying to break the chains and starts to look into the very substance of their metal structure. He sees the hands of the blacksmiths who forged them. They are not the hands of monsters, but the hands of people who were also afraid. He sees his mother's anxiety, a chain she inherited and passed on to him, thinking it was a shield to protect him from a cruel world. They controlled him because they were victims of control themselves. Their chains were forged in the fires of their own unhealed wounds and forgotten traumas. They held on tight not to hurt him, but because they were terrified of loss. Their love was a desperate attempt to find safety in an uncertain life. The hatred in Silas's heart begins to melt as he recognizes the shared burden of existence. He sees that everyone is doing their best with what they have. Understanding is the ultimate solvent. It dissolves the hardness of the heart and allows us to see the world through the lens of deep compassion. He forgives the blacksmiths, for they did not know they were forging prisons. They were only trying to survive the darkness they were born into. When we see the pain behind the control loses its power over us. We are no longer victims, but witnesses to a human tragedy. The walls of his mental prison are crumbling, not from the force of his blows, but from the warmth of his newfound and profound understanding. He is standing in the light of a new day, ready to face the world not as a rebel, but as a man who is whole. True freedom begins when we extend grace to those who have hurt us. It is the soil in which the seeds of healing finally start to grow. He no longer pulls against the metal. He embraces the lesson it taught him, and in that embrace, the iron loses its rigid and cold nature. What was once a shackle is now a reminder of his strength and his capacity to transform suffering into something beautiful and light for the world. They drift away on the winds of change, returning to the earth to nourish new life, leaving Silas standing free and unburdened in the open air. He has found the source of light within himself. He no longer needs to look to the sky for salvation. The sun is rising in his soul. Healing is not about forgetting what happened, but about changing how we relate to the memories that once caused us so much pain and suffering. The air is sweet and full of possibility. Every breath is a celebration of the present moment, free from the suffocating grip of the dead past. He sees himself clearly now, not as a prisoner, not as a victim, but as a creator of his own destiny, fueled by love and understanding. The garden of his mind is in full bloom, a sanctuary of peace that he can carry with him wherever he goes in the physical world. This is the true landscape of freedom, a vast expanse of potential that is no longer limited by the walls of his former internal prison. He has learned the greatest lesson of all, that the key to the cage was always in the hands of the one who was trapped. In our modern world, we still forge chains for one another every day, often in the name of love, duty, or social responsibility. We feel the pressure of the clock, the weight of the mortgage, and the constant demand to be more than we currently are in this life. But remember the lesson of Silas. Freedom is not found in the breaking of external things, but in the deep understanding of our inner world. Look at the hands that are holding you tight. See the fear, the history, and the humanity behind their desperate and sometimes painful grip. When you have the courage to empathize with your captors, you realize that they're just as bound as you are to their own pain. Walk your path with a light heart. You no longer need to carry the weight of other people's expectations or the ghosts of your own past. The act of letting go is the most powerful thing you can do. It is an act of supreme self-love and a declaration of your independence. Are you ready to stop fighting and start understanding? Are you ready to look into the eyes of your own fear and offer it peace? The door to your cage is unlocked. It has always been unlocked. All you have to do is choose to walk through it today. Step out into the sun. Embrace your life. You are finally free to be exactly who you were always meant to be in this world.